Hey, welcome back to another episode of Friendly Advice. Y'all really did not have to hype me up like that on the last episode. I was like, it's number one, and they really got here like, you better hype your bestie up. Hey. But anyway, let's get into it for real. The reason you're here, not to play around with me, you're here to get down to business. But today we're going to talk about how being a virtual assistant should not stop or harm you career wise. It really should help you. And it's so many things that people think are negative about going into entrepreneurship, and how we all idolize 9 to 5s, but nobody's thinking about all the skills you learn as an entrepreneur, especially a virtual assistant, which is wild in the online space. But I'm going to talk to you about how I literally increased, nearly doubled my salary options for working 9 to 5s after becoming a virtual assistant and building a VA agency. Everything I learned from agency life made it that much easier to transition it back into the corporate world. And if you see me looking over here, it's because I took notes. And I don't want to just ramble and keep you here all day. I want to be like the pastors say, I'm not going to be before you long. I'm going to be brief. Maybe, hopefully. All right. So let's get into it. To start off, let's talk about the income shift from $54,000 a year before I became a virtual assistant to $105K at base salary from my business when it was all said and done. So $54K was my base salary, and I would get a bonus from my 9 to 5 at that time based on my performance and the overall company's performance, which, I mean, if you know anything about tech companies, overall company performance is really based on their own scorecard that they made up at the beginning of the year and sometimes shifts in the middle of the year. And it's kind of like hit or miss. Right. So there was a couple of things that would make or break my bonus, and I couldn't really count on it. So really my base was 54, and sometimes I would get an extra 10K on top of that. And very rarely it would be 15 on top of that. But never over 70. Right. So I'm working this job and I would travel for work. That was more hours in my day. I would spend time at the office from 9 a.m. to at least 4 p.m. And then let's think about the commute. So I was spending a lot of time, trading a whole bunch of time for that amount of money. And I was at that point working my side hustle. If you haven't listened to the first episode, go back to my story. I'll put the link below. But go back to my first episode to learn more about my story. But I was working that job and had got up to 54K, and now I'm working my side hustle. And at that time, my virtual assistant business was almost competing with my salary. And I was like, I can make more if I just can be released from this job. So I quit my job, and immediately the first full year of virtual assistant work, I made $85,000 in base salary. And that's not the revenue for what I was doing as a virtual assistant. This is just what I was taking home. I was taking home $85,000. Overall, the revenue was $180,000 or something. I was just making sure I was being responsible with the revenue, profit, and paying. At that point, I only had the one VA that I talked about before. I only had one assistant under me, so it wasn't full agency life yet. But at that point, I was just making sure I paid myself a pretty solid salary. I could have increased it if I wanted to. Every now and then I would give myself a bonus that year when I was making the 85K base. And the bonus would be based on if I beat my goals for the month, just like the corporations. I created a scorecard to say okay, if we get at least this many leads turned into converted into clients, and if we get this many, we've met our goal, right? And then if we got, let's say that month I needed 2, but we get 4. So we exceed our goal at that point. So I give myself a bonus. And sometimes I would even give my VA a bonus based on what was going on. But yeah, so I instantly increased my salary from that 54 to 85. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't I was getting chump change from running a business. I know a lot of people are out here usually entrepreneurs suffer and struggle, which was part of the reason I closed my business, was that scarcity mindset, but it's not true. Like, really, if you do the work just like at a 9 to 5, you can pay yourself pretty well. And without having to wait on anyone to approve things, I literally would have to fight for people at work for a raise. Like, if you've heard before, when I started at that job, I was making 38K. By the end of it, I was only at 54K, and I had been there for 5 years. And I was fighting people for every new $1,000 in promotion. I had like 6 promotions while I was there, and 6 promotions only got me up to 54K. I immediately, as a virtual assistant, I decided to promote myself to OBM real quick. I was like, okay, I'm pretty good at this VA work for $25 an hour. Let's go see what they're talking about for $50 an hour as an OBM. I'm gonna go get me some of those clients, and I'm gonna go after those rates. And I quickly understood I was in control of my salary at all times, and it could be performance based because I was watching myself perform and saying like, okay, like you need to do this in order to have this be your income. I still do it now. In this version of my business, I'm like, okay, if we have 5 clients this month, or we have 5 leads turn into clients this month, that's meeting our goal. No bonus, but great job. You at least get your salary. And then if we get 6, here we go. Let's talk about a bonus. So that was number 1. There was a big income shift when I went from my corporate job to being a virtual assistant. Number 2, how my VA experience strengthened my resume. This is quite literally flabbergasting to me when I think about it, because we are fed so much untruth about entrepreneurship that like all of us have internalized. We all find and seek security in 9 to 5s, which is not bad. I'm not knocking it. I ran back to it. So hear me when I say it is fine to be at a full-time job. But we never stop to think the owners of these companies that we work for at one point were like us, taking a crazy risk with just an idea and going out on the limb to create the security that we all seek, right? So what makes entrepreneurship not a viable option for the rest of us? I don't know. It must be a scheme set up by Todd. But either way, when I decided to close my VA business, I immediately landed a 6-figure job, like in operations, doing what I already understood how to do for my agency. And this is because I didn't downplay my experience as a virtual assistant. I leveraged it. I added my VA work to my resume and like really spoke to their hearts. I was just kind of like, and it wasn't untrue. It wasn't like I was gassing myself up. It was things I was literally doing. I understood how to connect our sales operation system and move it over to the client management side and how to make the two work together. So it was never that I was like exaggerating what I was doing, because it was literally what I would do. I have a CRM called Dubsado. Most bigger companies use something like a Salesforce, right? But for a smaller company, you don't need something like a Salesforce. It's a bit too much. So I use Dubsado. And then to track and manage my leads inside my business, I use ClickUp. So I did set up automations between Dubsado and ClickUp so I could track and manage everything within it. And then also inside of ClickUp and Dubsado, there would be workflows for when a client moved from a lead to an actual full-time customer, right? And so I had already understood how to set those systems up, and I knew what I was doing. So I started out with like a tech startup company. So it was natural for me to figure out like what was going on with their smaller CRM, and how to make sure I set the operations up appropriately, right? And then also I spent a lot of time creating SOPs and videos and literally teaching my entire team like standard operating processes. So when I wrote it on my resume, I remember saying like, oh man, this might be like gassing myself up a little bit. And Ron was like, it's really not. Like, I literally have watched you make an SOP library with Nika, and y'all literally show people how to do everything from A to Z when it came to managing podcasts for your agency and what you expected out of each one of them. And y'all had an onboarding process for new virtual assistants to work for you. So it was not gassing myself up. It was literally my experience at that point. And when I think about that, if I hadn't have run my own agency, I don't know that a 9 to 5 would have ever let me have a chance to learn that. Like, I feel like I would have been stuck in like the customer facing jobs because that was what I was good at. I was a CSM for a long time. That's customer success manager. So I would have been kind of trapped in that lane for longer, but I skyrocketed my experience and background from my own business because I got to learn on my own terms, and I was putting my own money at risk when I was learning. So now, like, I've done all the risky business on my own over here. They're like, okay, cool. She knows how to manage making SOPs and operations. Let's hire her, right? So it will actually strengthen your resume. I might make an episode on like what translates from being a virtual assistant to like in how to put it on your resume. Let me know in the comments if that's something you're interested in, because I get it. There are times and places in life where you need to make a transition where you can't just do your own thing and run your own business, and that's completely okay. You get to choose that. All right, number 3. VA work is a part of your career journey. I think a lot of us do not give this enough praise. One of the biggest misconceptions about entrepreneurship, especially the VA world, is that it is a break from your career. And I know a lot of people talk about kind of like the motherhood gap or like a motherhood gap year, where a lot of women who can afford it will just take a break from working full time to stay with their infant until they're like 15, 22 months, or like from 0 to 2, which is beautiful and great, but their career suffers because of it. And because in between that, there is just not anything they're doing behind the scenes. I suggest parents do like virtual assistant work if you're taking a career like break from technical traditional 9 to 5s, but this could actually be something that catapults you into a better career once you're ready to go back into work. But becoming a VA or agency owner is a strategic career move for parents, especially. It provides you so much flexibility to work from home if you need to. I know like with a lot of the new return to office mandates, it makes it harder for some parents to stay in a traditional 9 to 5. And this could be the answer to you not actually taking a break or having a gap in your career on your resume, but you actually just become a virtual assistant agency owner or just a general virtual assistant while raising your kids. And if you ever want to return to a traditional 9 to 5, your VA experience can set you up to move right back in. And there is no longer that weird gap year where you're just like, I took a motherhood break, and people like say they don't judge. They're like, we listen and we don't judge, but they're judging. You just got moved down 2 steps for no reason. And I don't want that for you. I don't want your career to be in someone else's hands just because you decided your family needed to come first in that season. So if you don't think like business life is for you forever, that's perfectly fine. Virtual assistant work is perfect for this. Is not forever. This is for right now. Let's talk about what we just ran down, friends. So number 1, I shifted from $54,000 at base as a 9 to 5 worker and upgraded my salary to $105K base as an agency owner. Number 2, VA experience actually strengthens your resume. Use it as your superpower. And 3, VA work is definitely a part of your career journey. It does not make what you do less. All right. If you're considering becoming a VA, know that you're not just starting a side hustle. You are actually catapulting your career into the next levels that you probably wanted in the first place. If you are thinking about doing this right now, if you're like coming into motherhood, or you're thinking about like just stepping away and taking a break from traditional 9 to 5s. I know another thing for me in this political climate, another reason I came back, there are like a plethora of reasons I came back to entrepreneurship. The biggest shift was like I needed to focus on my boys. But one of the major shifts is like my political views really like change how my dynamic at work. And when I work for myself, I can take a break and breathe when I hear about like the political unrest and the current political climate that causes me anxiety and stress. At 9 to 5, I couldn't do that. Like if I had a 10 a.m. call, I had to take that 10 a.m. call and I needed to pretend like the world wasn't on fire. But in my business, the world is on fire. I'm going to have to reschedule your call for my clients. And this doesn't happen often. I'm going to have to reschedule my call, or I'm just shifting around when I record my podcast. I'm shifting around like whatever I have planned for the day because I need a moment to regulate my nervous system, to calm down, to not go into fight or flight because of what the news cycle is saying. And it's okay that this happens to me. But at a 9 to 5, it was hard for me to really compartmentalize those feelings. And I didn't have the time in each day to just take a deep breath and then go into work. I literally would have like 2 seconds in between calls to really like even think about myself. So yes. Anywho's, if you are thinking about becoming a virtual assistant, you want to start a virtual assistant agency, let's talk about it. If you are like waffling on whether this is like an actual career move, DM me. I love talking in the DMs. We can talk freely about like what's going on in your career, why you're considering a change. Even if you're somebody who's like currently a virtual assistant and you're like, I think I might need to go back to a 9 to 5 for a bit, also hit me up. I love to talk about like that experience for me and how that transition worked in my life. But until next time, see ya.